everyone. This is Joshua Smith of Apollo's Artifacts. I'm going to jump right into some disturbing news here as we see that the Satanic Temple is going to install a baby Baphomet statue among the holiday display in Illinois. Seems fitting, of course, with all of the murders that take place in Chicago. And indeed, the Baphomet is the symbol for our age. It is a hermaphroditic creature, which is perfectly fitting with the trans agenda. This is indeed what the Satanists and the left want everyone and everything to go ahead and turn into, and indeed to bow down and worship this creature. And it's all in the name of so-called religious freedom. As it says down here, in a press release about the Baphomet statue, the group said that it is in celebration of the satanic holiday Sol Invictus, or the Sun Unconquered, which, like Christmas, takes place on the 25th of December. According to their website, the day is a celebration of being unconquered by superstition and consistent in the pursuit and sharing of knowledge. The new display, created by artist Chris P. Andres, depicts the satanic deity Baphomet as a swaddling babe, the Satanic Temple said in their statement. And this is America in 2021. Aren't you so proud? In what I would call similarly related news from the Daily Mail, we have this. The inventor of the 3D printed coffin-like suicide capsules reveals plans to create a body implant for people with dementia that would kill its user if they ever forget to deactivate it. Here again is the beady-eyed kook who invented this suicide device. Next, I have another report from the Daily Mail. Pentagon is using artificial intelligence to predict the future and give it days of advanced warning on attacks on sensitive sites like the Panama Canal. Of course, a lot of good it did them during the days of all of the riots that went on for the better part of an entire year, as some $2 billion worth of property was destroyed and about 30 people murdered by leftist rioters. And how much do you want to bet that they have this thing programmed now to watch out for so-called extremism in America, but that always comes from the political right? Here we have an image from a recent funeral where Fauci was in attendance with Hillary Clinton, and as they lovingly embrace one another, Fauci said that he loves Hillary. And if ever you had any doubts about this horrendous creature, let those be over now. Here I have a report from the Financial Times. China tells citizens to stockpile food as COVID controls are tightened. Many people are beginning to suspect that China has other reasons further down the road for telling their people to stockpile all of these resources. Some believe this could be a long-term precursor to war, possibly beginning with the invasion of Taiwan. And people have already forgotten that it was Trump who gave away Hong Kong. He said and did absolutely nothing about that whatsoever, just like Biden will probably say and do nothing whatsoever about the loss of Taiwan. Here's another article about the same thing from Bloomberg. China urges stockpiling up ahead of the winter, prompting worries online. The article begins here, a statement from China's government urging local authorities to ensure there was adequate food supply during the winter and encouraging people to stock up on some essentials prompted concerned talk online, with people linking it with a widening coronavirus outbreak, a forecast cold snap, or even rising tensions with Taiwan. Of course, I would say it could be one or all of these things. And indeed, I would suggest that Americans need to be doing the same. Here we have a very disturbing report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Total household debt in the United States climbs over $15 trillion as credit card balances increase once more by some $17 billion. When you combine this problem with the problem of the national debt, you see that America is absolutely drowning in debt in every direction that you look. There's student loan debt, housing debt, credit card debt, and they detail all of those here in this article. I'll have this link below so that you can check out all of the details. Here's a report that should be surprising to many. Greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere hit a record high in 2020, despite the COVID pandemic and all of the lockdowns. So you had businesses all around the world were shut down, and yet somehow global emissions still increased. That is, if you were concerned about such things. I know many people are not. I'm not particularly concerned about such things. This still has to be a bit of a conundrum for those who said that the shutdowns and the lockdowns should have decreased these emissions. But I have a suspicion that it was China that contributed most of this. Here's an earlier article about a similar topic. Carbon dioxide reached a high in 2020 that has not been recorded since the mid-Pliocene era, 3.6 million years ago. And as you can see here on this graph of NOAA's Global Monitoring Laboratory, there has been a steady increase regardless of COVID. And I just throw this in here as food for thought. Here's an absolutely atrocious and disgusting article from Natural News, massive child sex trafficking ring busted, ran for decades, protected by police in exchange for sex. So I think I've pointed out here before, I'm not one of the defund the police types, but I'm also not a back the blue type or a thin blue liner. And this specifically is the reason why. They're involved in too many bad things on their own, whether they're harassing First Amendment auditors or harassing just general members of the public, trying to intimidate people for no reason, just because they have far too much power and far too little brains and too little training. So it begins here. 6 sex traffickers were arrested this week for running a Queens-based sex trafficking ring which trafficked young women and children from Mexico into the U.S. One of those indicted in Brooklyn federal court was a Putnam County police officer who was protecting not the children, but the child sex traffickers in exchange for sex. Wayne Pfeiffer, a Village of Brewster police officer, has been helping human traffickers smuggle in children and younger women from Mexico for years. The sadistic human smuggling scheme has been in operation for nearly 2 decades, since at least 2002. According to the indictment, Pfeiffer protected the child sex trafficking ring in exchange for sex with the victims. For years, Pfeiffer helped the ring avoid arrest, tipped them off to stings, and allowed them to abuse children and young women by exploiting the trust in his badge. According to the criminal complaint, in exchange for the protection, Pfeiffer had his way with the trafficking victims themselves, even bringing them to the police station where he would rape them. And I'll have this link below so that you can read the rest of this disgusting story. I can't cover it any further. And the last 2 articles that I'll be covering in this episode are throwback articles to the early 2000s. Headline out of The Observer: GlaxoSmithKline used orphans and babies as lab rats. UK firm tried HIV drug on orphans, and this is very similar to the horrendous experiments led by Fauci in the United States. It begins here. Orphans and babies as young as 3 months old have been used as guinea pigs in potentially dangerous medical experiments sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. British drug giant GlaxoSmithKline is embroiled in the scandal. The firm sponsored experiments on the children from Incarnation Children's Center, a New York care home that specializes in treating HIV sufferers and is run by Catholic charities. Children had either been infected with HIV or born to HIV-positive mothers. Their parents were dead, untraceable, or deemed unfit to look after them. According to documents obtained by The Observer, Glaxo has sponsored at least 4 medical trials since 1995 using Hispanic and Black children at Incarnation. The documents give details of all clinical trials in the U.S. and reveal the experiments sponsored by Glaxo were designed to test the safety and tolerance of AIDS medications, some of which have potentially dangerous side effects. Glaxo manufactures a number of drugs designed to treat HIV, including AZT. Normally, trials on children would require parental consent, but as the infants are in care, New York's authorities hold that role. And of course, it's a role that they largely abandoned and just let the companies do whatever they wanted to do. Here you can see that some of the trials were designed to test the toxicity of various AIDS medications. One involved giving children as young as 4 a high-dosage cocktail of 7 drugs at one time, and another looked at the reaction in 6-month-old babies to a double dose of measles vaccine. What relationship that had to the HIV medication, I have no idea. And again, here I have to emphasize the question: you really trust Big Pharma when they've done things like this for decades? And finally, I come to this from 2002. Bear found responsible for poisoning children in Peru. And if you recall the episode that I did earlier on the Factor VIII HIV blood infection crisis related to the contaminated Factor VIII, that was also Bayer that was responsible for that fiasco. After a 9-month investigation, a Peruvian congressional subcommittee has found significant evidence of criminal responsibility by both the agrochemical company Bayer and the Peruvian Ministry of Agriculture in the poisoning of 42 children in the remote Andean village of Tucamarca in October of 1999. Children were stricken after eating a school breakfast contaminated with organophosphate pesticide methylparathion. 24 children died before they could reach medical treatment. 18 others survived with significant long-term health and developmental consequences. Pesticide was heavily marketed under the name of Folidol to small farmers throughout Peru, the great majority of whom speak Quechua only and are illiterate. Bayer packaged the pesticide, a white powder that resembles powdered milk and has no strong chemical odor, in small plastic bags labeled in Spanish and displaying a picture of vegetables. The labels provided no usable safety information, such as pictograms, for the majority of users in remote villages, and little indication of the danger of the product. And again, what ultimately happens here is these huge corporations are found guilty of this wrongdoing. Then they face some minimal fines, which are far, far lower than whatever it was that they initially made off of the product to begin with. It's the same thing, rinse and repeat. And next, I'm going to upload the non-YouTube safe news coverage that I have of COVID. That will be over on Brighteon, Rumble, and BitChute. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.